Let's go on and talk about the issue of racial justice.
I just want the record to reflect she never answered the question.
Thank you, Vice President. In March, Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old emergency room technician in Louisville, was shot and killed after police officers executing a search warrant in a narcotics investigation broke into her apartment. The police said they identified themselves. Taylor's boyfriend said he didn't hear them do that. He used a gun registered to him to fire a shot, which wounded an officer. The officers then fired more than 20 rounds into the apartment. They say they were acting in self-defense. None of them have been indicted in connection with her death. Senator Harris, in the case of Breonna Taylor, was justice done? You have 2 minutes.
I don't believe so, and I've talked with Breonna's mother, Tamika Palmer, and her family deserves justice. She was a beautiful young woman.
The truth is now before us. The facts have been examined, and a grand jury comprised of our peers and fellow citizens has made a decision. Justice is not often easy. It does not fit the mold of public opinion, and it does not conform to shifting standards.
It really is remarkable that as a former prosecutor, you would assume that an impaneled grand jury looking at all the evidence got it wrong, but you're entitled to your opinion, Senator.
She had as her life goal to become a nurse, and she wanted to become an EMT to first learn what's going on out on the street.
She had been fired from being the EMT, I think banned from becoming the EMT again, because some car that she rented had a dead body found in it. But when that was discovered, the dead body in the car that she rented, it was like, okay, well, you can't be here anymore.
So she could then become a nurse and save lives, and her life was taken.
She was not an innocent person. Her name was on the warrant, and she was not an EMT.
Unjustifiably and tragically and violently.
According to Kentucky law, the use of force by Mattingly and Cosgrove was justified to protect themselves.
And it brings me to, the 8 minutes and 46 seconds that America witnessed, during which an American man was tortured and killed under the knee of an armed, uniformed police officer.
The police officers gave George Floyd every opportunity to comply. Yeah, there was 2 other individuals with Floyd. Yeah, right? They complied. Yeah, they was actually pleading for him to stop resisting, right? His friends. So, I mean, it was George Floyd's actions who put him in that position. Before, when they tried to put him in a police car, he was already saying he could not breathe. And he didn't even want to be in the car. That's why he was on the ground. Yeah, he wanted to go on the ground. So he's letting officers know he can't breathe. Nobody's choking him. Nobody's got a nail on his neck. It's kind of like the boy who cried wolf. You were saying you can't breathe. Now you're on the ground saying you can't breathe. Yeah. And I'm thinking it was a combination of things that killed George. I mean, you take that knee away, I think George would be alive. If you take those drugs out of his system, I think George Floyd is still alive. I think if George, with the drugs in his system, if he'd have got into the police car, I think he would be alive. Yeah. At some point in time, we have to hold ourselves accountable for our actions.
And people around our country, of every race, of every age, of every gender, perfect strangers to each other, marched shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm, fighting for us to finally achieve that ideal of equal justice under law. And I was a part of those peaceful protests. And I believe strongly that, first of all, we are never going to condone violence, but we always must fight for the values that we hold dear, including the fight to achieve our ideals. And that's why Joe Biden and I have said on this subject, look, and I'm a former career prosecutor. I know what I'm talking about. Bad cops are bad for good cops. We need reform of our policing in America and our criminal justice system, which is why Joe and I will immediately ban chokeholds and carotid holds.
As part of this new credentialing process, chokeholds will be banned, except if an officer's life is at risk.
George Floyd would be alive today if we did that.
The proper chokehold taught to police, rarely ever fatal, rarely even serious injuries. As a matter of fact, according to the police brutality database run by Fatal Encounters, a pro-police reform organization, less than 1%. Less than 1% of people die from any form of asphyxiation while under any type of restraint during police encounters. 3.5 times more people are killed by tasers.
Oh, so tasers are a deadly weapon.
Tasers are significantly more dangerous than chokeholds. Name me one person who's suffered permanent damage in any professional fighting sport, sanctioned fighting sport, from a chokehold. It's never happened.
Yeah.
Now, people will say, well, it's because you tap. No, you can find videos longer than you could, more footage you could watch in a lifetime of people going unconscious in the octagon.
Yeah.
Now, they say, well, referee steps in. Sure, that's the point of police training.
Exactly.
You don't hold a choke for a minute. If you hold it, they go out, cuff them, you're done.
We will require a national registry for police officers who break the law.
Under this executive order, departments will also need a share of information about credible abuses so that officers with significant issues do not simply move from one police department to the next.
We will, on the issue of criminal justice reform, get rid of private prisons and cash bail.
In my last video, I talked about recent criminal justice reform in New York State and showed some examples of the unintended consequences of the new bail reform law. Under the new law, judges are no longer able to set bail for a long list of over 150 misdemeanors and nonviolent felonies. So in most cases, instead of being able to set bail or hold someone in custody, you have mandatory release. And that's contributing to a large spike in crime and repeat offenders. In the first 2.5 months of 2020, robbery is up 33.9%, felonious assault 9.9%, burglary 26.5%, grand larceny 15.8%, and auto theft is up 68%. Overall, it's a 20% jump in crime. According to the NYPD, in the first 2 months of 2020, 482 people charged with a felony were released without bail, only to be rearrested for new crimes 846 times.
And we will decriminalize marijuana, and
Thank you, Senator Harris.
we will expunge the records of those who have
Thank you,
been
Senator
convicted
Harris.
of marijuana. This is
Thank
a
you,
time
Senator
for
Harris.
leadership on a tragic, tragic issue
Senator Harris,
of
your time is
unarmed
up.
Black people in America who have
Thank
been
you, Senator
killed.
Harris.
As of June 1st, 2020, the Washington Post's database of fatal police shootings in 2019 showed 9 unarmed Black victims and 19 unarmed white victims of fatal police shootings. By comparison, about 7,500 Blacks die of criminal homicide a year. Ideally, officers would take no one's life in the course of their duties. But in light of the number of arrests that officers make each year, around 10 million, and the number of deadly weapons attacks on officers, 27 a day, it is not clear that 1,000 civilian deaths, the vast majority occurring in the face of potentially deadly attack, show a law enforcement profession that is out of control. Sure, there are bad cops of all races who must be removed. That is true of every profession and always will be. But so is this. The overwhelming majority of officers are motivated by a desire to help the most vulnerable among us. Police are not the problem. Racism is not the problem. Crime is the problem.
Vice President Pence, let me pose the same question to you. In the case of Breonna Taylor, was justice done? You have 2 minutes, uninterrupted.
Well, our heart breaks for the loss of any innocent American life. And the family of Breonna Taylor has our sympathies. But I trust our justice system, a grand jury that refused the evidence. I think, look, and with regard to George Floyd, there's no excuse for what happened to George Floyd. And justice will be served. But there's also no excuse for the rioting and looting that followed. I mean, it really is astonishing. Flora Westbrook is with us here tonight in Salt Lake City. Just a few weeks ago, I stood at what used to be her salon. Was burned to the ground by rioters and looters. And Flora is still trying to put her life back together. And I must tell you, this presumption that you hear consistently from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris that America is systemically racist.
And this is not a coincidence. It is the effect of structural racism.
Do you believe there is systemic racism in law enforcement?
Absolutely. But it's not just in law enforcement, it's across the board.
And that, as Joe Biden said, that he believes that law enforcement has an implicit bias against minorities is a great insult to the men and women who serve in law enforcement. And I want everyone to know who puts on the uniform of law enforcement every day that President Trump and I stand with you. And it is remarkable that when Senator Tim Scott tried to pass a police reform bill, brought together a group of Republicans and Democrats, Senator Harris, you got up and walked out of the room. And then you filibustered Senator Tim Scott's bill on the Senate floor that would have provided new accountability, new resources. Look, we don't have to choose between supporting law enforcement, improving public safety, and supporting our African-American neighbors and all of our minorities. Under President Trump's leadership, we'll always stand with law enforcement, and we'll do what we've done from day one, and that is improve the lives of African Americans.
Thank you, Vice President
Record unemployment, record investments in education, and we'll fight for school choice for all of our minorities.
Thank you, Vice President.
I'd like to respond.
Senator Harris.
I will not sit here and be lectured by the Vice President on what it means to enforce the laws of our country.
Most troubling, Ms. Harris fought tooth and nail to uphold wrongful convictions that have been secured through official misconduct that included evidence tampering, false testimony, and the suppression of crucial information by prosecutors.
I am the only one on this stage who has personally prosecuted everything from child sexual assault to homicide.
So in 2010, there was a big article in San Francisco Weekly, and they were pestering her office. And then what they got was this false statement that they were protecting victims. It's just a flat-out insult. She could have redacted the names, blacked out the names and left them out. Everything he did to gather information and to try and prosecute and go after them disappeared and went the other way. She shielded and protected them, and we were floored at what happened. Her participation in going after clergy or predators of the Catholic Church or bishops who had enabled these people was less than zero.
I'm the only one on this stage who has prosecuted the big banks for taking advantage of America's homeowners. I'm the only one on this stage who prosecuted for-profit colleges for taking advantage of our veterans. And the reality of this is that we are talking about an election in 27 days, where last week the President of the United States took a debate stage in front of 70 million Americans and refused to condemn white supremacists.
Not true.
Are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups and to say that they need to stand down and not add to the violence in a number of these cities, as we saw in Kenosha and as we've seen in Portland?
Sure,
Are you
I'm
prepared to specifically
do it?
Well, go ahead, sir.
I would say almost everything I see is from the left wing, not from the right wing.
So what are you saying?
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace.
Then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it. Do you want to call him? What do you want to call them? Give me a name. Give me a
white
name.
Supremacists and
who would you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what. Somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left, because this is not a right-wing problem. This is a left-wing.
FBI director
This is a left-wing problem.
White supremacist. Antifa's an idea, not an organization.
Oh, you got to be
not
kidding.
militia.
And
Not true.
it wasn't like he didn't have a chance.
What are your views on the Ku Klux Klan and white supremacists?
I totally disavow the Ku Klux Klan. I totally disavow David Duke. I've been doing it now for 2 weeks. You're probably about the 18th person that's asked me the question. It was very clear. That question was also talked about in the form of groups. I want to know, which groups are you talking about? You have to tell me which groups. Ultimately, he got to the Ku Klux Klan, which obviously I'm going to disavow. And by the way, if you look on my Twitter account, almost immediately after the program, they were disavowed again. You know, it's amazing. When I do something on Twitter, everybody picks it up, goes all over the place. But when I did this one, nobody ever picks it up. Take a look at my Twitter account.
He didn't do it, and then he doubled down.
How many times do I have to reject? I've rejected David Duke. I've rejected the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. From the time I'm 5 years old, I rejected them. I put it on Twitter last week. How many times? You know, it's an amazing thing with Twitter. I have 6 million, more than 6 million, and I have another 6 million with Facebook. I have like 13 or almost 14 million with Instagram. When I put out a minor message, everybody picks it up. Donald Trump just tweeted something very unimportant. Let me just explain. When I put out that I reject KKK and David Duke, nobody picks it up. You know why they don't? Because they don't want to pick it up.
And then he said, when pressed, stand back, stand by.
Again, I don't know who Proud Boys are, but whoever they are, they have to stand down, let law enforcement do their work.
Mr. President, in this speech when you said stand by, that's my first question.
Just stand by. Look, law enforcement will do their work. They're going to stand down. They have to stand down. Everybody. They have to stand, whatever group you're talking about, let law enforcement do the work.
And this is a part of a pattern of Donald Trump's. He called Mexicans rapists and criminals.
They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime. They're rapists. And some, I assume, are good people. But I speak to border guards, and they tell us what we're getting. And it only makes common sense. It only makes common sense. They're sending us not the right people. It's coming from more than Mexico. It's coming from all over South and Latin America, and it's coming probably from the Middle East. But we don't know, because we have no protection, and we have no competence. We don't know what's happening.
He instituted as his first act a Muslim ban.
Trump's executive order temporarily banned immigration from several Muslim-majority countries: Iran, Libya, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, North Korea, and Venezuela. Even though 5 of the 7 nations in the order have Muslim-majority populations, Chief Justice John Roberts wrote that Trump's directive was on its face neutral toward religion and had a legitimate purpose. Trump's travel order is not a total ban on Muslims entering the United States, although it does restrict their immigration. You may disagree about the motivation behind Trump's order, but it's clear that it is not the sweeping Muslim ban that he promised in 2015. President Trump has not been able to ban anyone based on their religion from entering the United States. Time for the verdict. We rate this promise broken.
He, on the issue of Charlottesville, where people were peacefully protesting the need for racial justice, where a young woman was killed, and on the other side there were neo-Nazis carrying tiki torches, shouting racial epithets, anti-Semitic slurs, and Donald Trump, when asked about it, said there were fine people on both sides.
And you had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name. And you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly. Now, in the other group also, you had some fine people, but you also had troublemakers, and you see them come with the black outfits, and with the helmets, and with the baseball bats. You had a lot of bad people in the other group too.
This is who we have as the President of the United States. And America, you deserve better.
A organization made up of many fine people who continue to display the Confederate flag.
Joe Biden will be a president who brings our country together.
Just clap for that, you stupid bastard.
Senator Harris.
And recognizes the beauty in our diversity.
Unlike the African-American community, with notable exceptions, the Latino community is an incredibly diverse community.
And the fact that
Senator
we all
Harris,
have so much more in common than what separates us.
there are probably anywhere from 10 to 15% of the people out there that are just not very good people.
You know, I think this is one of the things that makes people dislike the media so much in this country, Susan, is that you selectively edit, just like Senator Harris did, comments that President Trump and I and others on our side of the aisle make. I mean, Senator Harris conveniently omitted, after the president made comments about people on either side of the debate over monuments, he condemned the KKK, neo-Nazis, and white supremacists, and has done so repeatedly.
Racism is evil, and those who cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups that are repugnant to everything we hold dear as Americans.
You're concerned that he doesn't condemn neo-Nazis. President Trump has Jewish grandchildren. His daughter and son-in-law are Jewish. This is a president who respects and cherishes all of the American people. But you talk about having personally prosecuted. I'm glad you brought up your record, Senator.
Thank you.
But I really need to make this point. When you were DA in San Francisco, when you left office, African Americans were 19 times more likely to be prosecuted for minor drug offenses than whites and Hispanics. When you were Attorney General of California, you increased the disproportionate incarceration of blacks in California. Yeah. You did nothing on criminal justice reform in California. You didn't lift a finger to pass the First Step Act on Capitol Hill. I mean, the reality is your record speaks for itself. President Trump and I have fought for criminal justice reform.
Thank you, Vice President.
We fought for educational choice and opportunities for African Americans, all of our members.
Thank you, sir.
And we'll do it for 4
minutes. Thank you. Let me give you 30 seconds because we're running out of time.
I appreciate that. First of all, having served as the Attorney General of the state of California, the work that I did is a model of what our nation needs to do.
There was a big crime lab scandal whereby there was a lab technician who was using the drugs rather than testing them. And as a result, many, many convictions became tainted. And it turned out that her office had known for months, top attorneys had, and had not disclosed that information to the defense. And when a judge found out, she became quite incensed and wrote an opinion castigating Harris for allowing this to happen. Harris's reaction to that was to try to get the judge disqualified by saying that she had a conflict of interest because her husband was a defense lawyer. That failed, and 600 cases were thrown out.
And we will be able to do under a Joe Biden presidency.
She had a police department when she was there that, in fact, was abusing people's rights.
Our agenda includes what this administration has failed to do. It will be about not only instituting a ban on chokeholds and carotid holes.
Thank you.
Not only.
Thank you, Senator.
I would like to go through.
These are points that you made earlier in the hour, and I want to talk about the election itself before we have to.
But I want to talk about the connection between what Joe and I will do and my record, which includes I was the first statewide officer to institute a requirement that my agents would wear body cameras and keep them on full time. We were the first to initiate a requirement that there would be a training for law enforcement on implicit bias.
The problem is that when you give the same person the damn IAT twice, they don't get the same results. So there's a rule for diagnostic tests. And the rule is the reliability, retest reliability, has to exceed something like 0.8 or 0.9, 0.8 at least. So the Big Five does that, IQ tests do that, but there's damn few tests that pass that reliability criteria, and the IAT is only reliable, I don't remember precisely, but I think it's about 0.5, which isn't even, it's not even near close enough to be used as a diagnostic test. Plus, it's not valid. So what does that mean? Well, let's say I assess your unconscious bias and give you a diagnosis. Well, there's no evidence that it predicts your behavior. So what good is it? What good is it? Well, it's good if you want people to send you to retraining exercises so that you can have your perceptions adjusted in the direction that your organization and the state thinks is proper.
Because yes, Joe Biden and I recognize that implicit bias does exist, Mr. Vice President, contrary to what you may believe.
And the people at St. Mike's, they say, well, this is scientifically validated. It's like, no, it's not. And worse, let's say you do have unconscious bias, just for the sake of argument, and you could measure it reliably, which you can't, and then it was valid, which it isn't. Let's say all of those things were in case. There's no evidence whatsoever that those damn unconscious bias training programs, retraining programs, have the effect that they're supposed to have, and there's some evidence that they actually have the reverse effect. And maybe that's because people don't really like being marched off to re-education by their employers after they've been diagnosed as racist, even if there's no evidence that they in fact are.
We did the work of instituting reforms that were about investing in reentry. This is the work that we have done and the work we will do going forward. And again, I will not be lectured by the Vice President on our record of what we have done in terms of law enforcement and keeping our communities safe and a commitment to reforming the criminal justice system of America. What else do we know about this population, 18 through 24? They are stupid.
We have put together, I think, the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organization in the history of American politics.